My guest today is Dr. Tristan Bekinschtein, who is an EU Marie Curie Fellow and senior researcher at the MRC-Cognition and Brain Sciences Unit, Cambridge, UK, and a Fison Fellow at ICM Paris. His lab is primarily interested in the complexity of thought and what makes us human. Welcome, Tristan.
Thank you. How are you, Jill?
Yeah, thanks for doing this. So I got some of your papers, and I want to start with the one that entitled Embracing Sleep Onset Complexity. And you say here the transition from wakefulness to sleep is neither an all or none nor a linear phenomenon. It's a specific period characterized by fluctuations between various transient and local neural patterns with high inter and intra-individual variability. So during the SOP, that is a sleep onset period, there is an intricate interplay between the internal and external information sources that feed neurocognitive processing. You say here individuals can still respond to some external stimuli while having dreamlike experiences. Drowsiness is often linked to negative cognitive effects, such as attention lapses. However, growing evidence indicates that the sleep onset period, SOP, may serve key cognitive functions, memory and creativity. For example, we say here about 1/3 of the population suffers from sleep onset difficulties. A better understanding of the SOP could help to identify key markers for diagnosing and treating these disorders. Yeah, so I guess most of us are familiar with the sleep onset complexity or difficulty, as you say here. And I guess the sleep onset period is highly variable. For some, it's just a minute. I have met people who say, give me 30 seconds, I'll be asleep. And for some, it could be several hours. And it's a difficult problem. And so what does your research say about this sleep onset period, which is you intently go to bed and then you measure when you're actually asleep? Is that the SOP?
The onset period, sleep onset, as the clinicians call it, used to be what the in sleep scientists call is N1, or the little state of the night when you're not awake, but also you're not in true sleep, which is called N2. And that N1 initially in the 50s, the 1950s, was considered just one state, like a stable state, like, N1, sleep onset. Of course, they all knew that it wasn't one state, that you're awake and suddenly you're drowsy and suddenly you're asleep. They knew that wasn't the case. They just decided to ignore the idea that there was a transitional period, right? Imagine a kid is at the top of the slide, and then instantly is in the middle slide, and instantly is at the end of the slide, down. That's is not true, right? The slide in itself is N1, that sleep onset. But nobody ever falls asleep like in a slide, like in a really beautiful fall from the top of the slide, and then, I mean, rarely, but just by chance, because that's now how evolution shaped us. There's a lot of changes that have to go in the brain and in the body and in the mind, from when you're completely awake with your eyes closed, starting to relax, until you're truly asleep. So people say, "Oh, give me a minute, I'll be asleep." Well, it's not really a minute. It might be within a minute you are deep in N1, but not truly yet in sleep. If you sleep within a minute, most likely you're close to pathologies of sleep, related to narcolepsy and these type of things. It's okay to fall asleep fast. It's that let's not worry our audience about being easy sleepers. It's okay to sleep fast. That doesn't mean that you're asleep when you think you're asleep. There's also a dissociation about your perception of that you're asleep and your true sleep.
Yeah, so as you say, so it's neither binary nor linear. It's a process of going to
Yeah.
sleep, and there are different stages, as you say, N1, N2, or things like that. I would imagine there's some evolutionary advantages. I'm just going on a tangent here, Tristan, so you can correct
Yeah.
me. Um, Sleeping was a dangerous time for Homo sapiens 50,000 years ago. And so from an evolutionary perspective, they would have sort of fine-tuned this as, okay, I'm going to begin to sleep, but I know, that lions and tigers are around, so I cannot really fully go to sleep immediately. I have to, sort of get a probability distribution of further danger before I go to sleep. Is that the way to think about it?
I think there's an aspect of the idea of the sentinel idea of sleep, right? That there is something that still has, the capacity to capture changes in the environment, but these capacities, of course, is not a discernible capacity. It's not a, discriminatory capacity. So if there is a continuous sound of the night, even with, animals at night, etc., but they all feel very continuous, then it's fine. But if something changes, in that jungle, sound of the night, something different. In fact, if it suddenly there is silence, which is
Mm,
usually means there's a big predator that have been seen in the, from the trees, then that will wake you up. It will be the silence that wake you up
mm,
as a possible prey. On the other hand, it's very clear that because of the change of because of the world basically rotating in its own axis every almost for 24 hours, that the evolution was shaped by that, and the system clearly evolved to have periods of quiet where, the brain or the body, or, if they didn't have a brain as an animal but just very simple bodies,
yeah.
there will be a period of cleaning, the proteins and the cells and etc. And that would be during the day or during the night, depending on the type of evolution that you underwent. So nobody can escape from a period of cleanup. In animals with a nervous system, that period we call it sleep. um, and yes, it's a period where you're more
Mm,
vulnerable, um, and that's why different evolution. So in groups like us, in group mammals, there is they take turns to sleep. So there's almost a sentinel,
yeah, yeah.
not only at the brain level but also at the
Mm.
group level socially.
Yeah, so in that sense, sleep was a communal activity.
Mhm.
You needed somebody to sort of look after you. Um, but yeah, you say here sleep is crucial for many vital functions and has been extensively studied. So that was very clear. By contrast, the sleep onset period (SOP), often portrayed as a mere prelude to sleep, has been largely overlooked and remains poorly characterized. Yeah, that's very interesting, Tristan. So the sleep onset period, given the high variability uh, among the samples, um, there has to be some reason why we are. Let me ask you in a question. Is there a reason we are seeing this high variability? I mean, I would imagine nature would have said, hey, sleep is important for you. I'm going to give you a switch on the right side of your brain. You turn it off and you go to sleep. And then 8 hours later, turn back itself on, automatic, switching mechanism. But nature didn't do that. So is there a reason why this is highly variable, this SOP?
So we know that the SOP transition towards, light sleep, which will be N2, depends a lot on what was happening and what your state of the brain in wakefulness is just before going to sleep. So if you're very, 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 very stable person and you have an amazing continuous routine, then your variability of falling asleep will be lower. But in modern society, the transition depends on what happened during the day, and your worries and how your brain was used and your body and etc. So it's not surprising that the sleep onset depends on what you did during the day, much more than sleep depends what you do today. Of course, sleep is influenced, but much less than the sleep onset of what you've been doing during the day. So, in classic clinical sleep, they always say, if you have problems falling asleep, or maintaining sleep, you need to learn about sleep hygiene. And the sleep hygiene is basically try to cool down, man, and try to reset the day at night before you go to sleep. So, start to do some relaxation, some meditation, try to leave out your worries, away from it. And don't take your phone and doom scrolling to bed. Try to keep the bed to sleep and not for other actions, unless there are special actions that happens usually during the bed. We think that the most variability comes because it depends a lot of your state before falling asleep.
Yeah. So that sort of explains the intra-individual variability, as you say here. So my mental state, my environment, the light conditions, all are going to affect the SOP for me. But the variability, I mean, variability from person to person, was there a reason for that? So suppose I put X and Y in a controlled environment, I would imagine they're going to show some high variability in the SOP, right?
Yeah. And between people, there's huge variability, and there's not that much obvious genetical variability that has been evaluated in this respect, just because there hasn't been that many wide studies about sleep transition. So we can't really look at allelic genetical variability at the population level. We know there's a lot of aspects related to the variance of the circadian rhythms. And I'm quite a night owl type of person, circadian wise, and you might also be a night person, but my wife is a morning person, and there's a huge variability in this morningness, eveningness, lark type of person, etc. So we know there's an effect there, very clear. As a morningness, eveningness, is a circadian effect. I'm a very irregular circadian person. Even if I'm a night person, but other people have low stability in the rhythms. So the relationship between them, how long you've been awake, and your level of stress, your stable level of stress as a person, and the circadian and components, increase the variability between people quite a lot. Which, in fact, once you sleep, all of these factors don't apply. So people are more, consistent in between each other in terms of sleep. But in the transition where the system is going from one particular mode to another, the opportunity for factors to modify that transition is huge. Every transition that we have, it's much more multifactorial than stable states. This is and this is just basic, physics dynamics, right? But applied to physiology.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is in your research, Tristan. I want to ask you. So as you mentioned, the morning or night person, there seem to be two such cohorts of people. Again, from a specialization, Homo sapien specialization perspective, perhaps, a 50-50 break there could have been advantages for Homo sapiens. Some people wake up early and some people wake up late. But do we have any data on any sort of genetic correlation to this early to late?
Yes. There's clear genetic variability, allelic variability for the 10-15% people who are really night people, and then the 10-15 that are really, really morning people, and then most of us that are, along somewhere in the axis. So there's a nice distribution in that sense, and I have a very strong, circadian type genes have been shown quite a lot in the last 15 years. There's a really nice paper in 2009 by the Belgian group in Philippe Penier, where they select the people by the genetic type of morningness and eveningness, and then they do a series of cognitive studies in the scanner in the morning and in the evening, and they cross each other, just to see if the people the brain is in a particular mode if you're a morning or an evening person at 7 a.m. And your cognitive capacity and your brain capacity changes dramatically depending on your type.
So the on the tails of the distribution, 15% morning and 15% night. Those people, do we know if their SOP is much lower than those in the middle, the 70%?
Not necessarily. They just their SOP will be faster when you are at the right time. That's basically as like most of us, right? So in the lab, we when we do experiments, we invite people for easy sleepers, right? Is that because we want to characterize the sleep onset, so we don't want people who won't fall asleep in 2 hours, right? So we basically send them the questionnaires, and we do a mini interview about their normal capacity to sleep. And if you take the train, from Cambridge, where I am, to London, would you, is it likely that you're going to fall asleep? And if the person say yes, it's great. Have you ever fallen asleep in watching a movie or or driving? If the people answer yes, we know it's an easy sleeper. Then we ask them, do you think it would be easy for you to fall asleep in the morning, at midday, in the afternoon? Some people say anytime. Some people say definitely not in the morning. Say, okay, great. Yeah, it's good that you know yourself, because then you're not going to waste your time to come into the lab for a falling asleep experiment. So we know there's definitely the proneness, how prone the people are to fall asleep at a particular time of the day. It depends on their circadian eveningness, morningness sort of type.
Yeah, so we'll go into another paper, but I just a very peripheral question, Tristan. So vitamin D has been in the news as a very beneficial thing, but vitamin D also interferes with sleep patterns. And so given a large population is now medicating themselves on vitamin D, I wondered if it has some effect on the data.
Really, to be honest, I don't really know. I know that if you don't have that vitamin D, you might have some problems during sleep. But I think in modern times, people have enough vitamin D. So unless you are deprived of vitamin D, and that helps in your sleep disturbances, most of the time there is a saturation effect, right? You can keep on having vitamin D, but you're already sleeping fine. So that's not going to be, what I mean is that vitamin brain receptors related to sleep regulation are saturated easily. That's if we're going to get geeky on it, right?
Yeah. And so, this appears to be a very interesting area. As you say, SOP hasn't been studied, but you say SOP could have potentially both positive and negative effects, if I understand this correctly. If that SOP is high, let's say, during that time, as you say, it's not a binary or linear process to go to sleep, but if that SOP is high, something interesting is happening during that time too, right? So it could turn out to be quite beneficial.
What do you mean by high in this case? What's a high SOP for you?
I haven't seen the data or research. I would say a couple of hours.
Oh, you mean, okay, slow transition.
Yeah.
Okay. So the variability, the normal availability, we would like to think it's relatively normal in terms of the, will be between 3 minutes and 25 minutes. That would be a normal transition. Any longer, and we start to get worried, unless you are a high-level meditator, where you actually is going to meditate for 40 minutes. At one point, you're going to stop meditating and let yourself slide into sleep. Great. But those are not the most of the population. So if you're ruminating and not falling asleep or getting a bit drowsy and then waking up and etc., then you clearly have, some problems during the transition, some sleep onset problems. And 2 hours would be a lot. 2 hours will be 2 hours will be that you definitely not getting into deep sleep. Within 20 minutes, you should be in deep sleep, and then go into light sleep and then deep sleep and then REM. And maybe you do make some micro awakenings like everybody does. Even if most of the time you're not aware that you're awakening during the night. But we don't consider that sleep onsets. It are like micro awakenings coming back, so it's quite hilly peaky. It's not like the sleep onset. If you wake up quite a lot during the night, then you might go up to the wakefulness state that you will take you longer to fall asleep. But many times, especially after 50, people do go to to basically urinate at night, and then they come back and they fall asleep quite fast, even if they've been doing an action. They've started to walk, they went to the toilet, they did the business, come back, and they fall asleep relatively fast. So that's not a true wakefulness.
Okay.
It's a pseudo wakefulness in that sense, right? So it's very clear that there is a hysteresis. There's a slow aspect of the process. The same way you don't wake up immediately. Even if you wake up, with a lot of danger, with a lot of adrenaline, still your brain is in a dual state. So let's take a moment to think that the state of change from awake to sleep is the highest change our brain does naturally. The biggest change that our brain does naturally every day. So we acknowledge that, and we understand that the process cannot be like immediate. If it's immediate, there is something wrong. If it takes too long, then there is also something wrong.
It's like shutting down a computer. And
it's a lot of processes, right? They're happening.
Right. So I want to go into another paper, Tristan. So another interesting paper, effects of alertness on perceptual detection and discrimination. So you say here the level of alertness fluctuates throughout the day, exerting modulatory effects on human cognitive processes at any moment. However, our knowledge of how alertness level interacts with specific cognitive demands and perceptual rules of a task is still limited. Here we used a perceptual decision-making paradigms to explore this issue. We analyzed data from 4 different experiments involving a total of 113 participants. Talk a little bit about this experiment.
So what happened is throughout the years we did a series of experiments of people taking decisions, listening to things, feeling things in their hands with a couple of sensors, and this sort of stimuli that we gave to the people when they were awake, we let them close their eyes in a chaise longue and get slowly into drowsiness, sometimes even true sleep. But the idea is that we'll continue taking the decision. For example, if a sound was coming from the left or a sound was coming from the right, they needed to press a button to the left sound or to the right sound to basically indicate location. It's a very simple discrimination that you need to discriminate whether the sound came from the left or the right. I can make it more difficult, more easy to you, and that's what we did. People are awake, they do it almost perfectly. They get a bit drowsy, they start to get a bit slower sometimes even make mistakes that you wouldn't do when you're awake. You're mildly drowsy, then you make more mistakes, then you're really drowsy and you start to make also, 20% of the time you make mistakes, which would be unthinkable a few minutes before when you were awake. And also sometimes you hear the sound, but you don't press. You slowly are at the point of the drowsiness of the N1 of that low alertness, where you're not able to respond. Even if you process the sound, you were not able to respond. And then the the second afterwards, another sound comes and you do respond. So there's this very nice sort of dynamics of the transition to sleep, the SOP, the sleep onset, where you first, in some of the tasks, depending on the task, you first get slower, and then you start to make mistakes. And then you get even more slower, you make more mistakes, and then you start to make mistake and get slower and also miss some sounds that were unmissable, like beep on the left or boop on the right, right? So very, very, very obvious things that you suddenly don't respond. Is that a problem of attention? Well, who knows if it's a problem of attention. I wouldn't call it attention. Eventually, there is a lapse of attention because your system is so close to the actual sleep onset that for the moment there was some processing, but not enough to either take a decision or not enough to press the button. So clearly, this sleep onset in that paper, we used it as a model to understand cognition. So we had detection tasks, whether you've heard the sound or not, or discrimination tasks, whether the sound was this or that, it was coming from here or there. So these are two perceptual classic aspects of perception, detection and discrimination. And what we did with this falling asleep experiment, series of experiments, is to separate, how the sleep onset fragments detection or discrimination equally or in a different manner. And we showed that it's different. That it depends on what you're doing. The process of falling asleep impacts differently, modulates differently, whether it's a detection or discrimination task. In another experiments, if it's a decision making with inhibition task, or you have to apply a strategy. So that's a big section of the lab does that, right? That uses the sleep onset to understand cognition.
Yeah, so detection probably has higher value for Homo sapiens. Discrimination maybe not that important when you are sleeping or about to sleep fully, let's say. But you're finding in the data that there is a distinct difference between detection. I could say there's something there, and discrimination. I couldn't tell if it's X or X prime.
Yeah, so that's it. It was interesting to see because we had two experiments on detection and two experiments on discrimination, right? So we could see what was common and what wasn't in that one, and it was really nice to be able to see that the sharpness of the capacity for you to take the decision was different depending of what you were doing, and what I thought was particularly interesting that we didn't expect, right? That the detection the sensitivity to the side of the stimuli decreasing both, right? And the capacity to take the decision was also changed. But the people didn't have that. So the effect of drowsiness was stronger for discrimination, as you sort of mentioned, that it makes sense for you evolutionarily than for detection. So the idea is that the capacity to decide whether something is one thing or another is more impacted than the capacity to decide if something was there by the transition. That would be the right wording. Instead of saying detection or discrimination, I think it's better to talk in real words. Like we seem to be able to keep on detecting things relatively okay, less than before, while we're falling asleep. But to decide if the thing is one thing or another, then, as you say, maybe less important, then it gets more modulated.
Yeah, so you mentioned sun rising in the east as opposed to the west. I wondered if we sort of go into harder problems in the sense that suppose I show them a angry tiger and a small cat, would they be able to differentiate between those two?
Yeah. So again, the visual discrimination is hard in drowsiness because most people will be already with the eyes closed. If you do the experiments with sleep deprivation, but people with the eyes open, this is a different way of of thinking about the transition. You're awake, but your system is pushing to be in sleep because you're sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Then the discrimination with these two things will still be there clearly, maybe slightly lower. But most of the time, people are really good at discriminating the sounds better than the visuals, which is really interesting.
Okay.
This is sort of it's in agreement with the idea that you could have your eyes closed, and that very related to falling asleep. Whether you cannot shut your ears, so in that sense, auditory information is quite preserved. Auditory processing during sleep quite preserved to a certain degree, some basic aspect of auditory process, not discriminatory detail aspect, but more than visual, definitely, and more than sensory, also more than touch. Auditory seems to be the most, reserve of processing during, during the transition and during light sleep.
Yeah, sound is an early warning system. And so I can sort of intuitively understand why that is more sensitive. By the time you touch something, it's too late for Homo sapiens. But sound potentially sort of an early warning system. What I'm sort of puzzled by is, again, if nature did the good design, we would have had something in the brain that's sort of alert all the time, even when you're sleeping. But we don't seem to have that, right?
We do
Okay.
completely. I mean, we are extremely shaped by evolution in some aspects. You could even do the game of parents with newborns, and then you can do the crash in the streets, the sound of a trumpet, the loud music, and they will be sleeping, and you do a little bit of half of the decibels of a little baby cry, and they wake up. So there is clearly a tuning into what is important for you, and that's the idea of the sentinel system, right? It's sentinel to specific things. So yes, we are good at detection, but detection of what? It's not about discrimination necessarily, right? So yes, we do know that there is a specificity in that sense.
And detection, I would imagine, is less energy consumptive than differentiation. Differentiation is a higher order decision process, I would think, right?
I guess depends on the discrimination aspect. I mean, from a perspective of how many neurons you need to detect or discriminate something, it's just a handful. So I'm not super worried in that sense. I think that detection it's a very basic sort of system that can be done really without getting into complicated areas of the brain. And that's why it has a lot of penetrance, let's say, than discrimination that is supposed to hold a comparator, right? An aspect of comparison in memory or working memory. So, but we also know that you can ask the people to hold a rule in their brain while they're falling asleep. If you hear X, press this button. If you hear Y, press this other button. And they can hold that as long as they were doing that decision, taking those decisions and doing the task while falling asleep, then that information persists during sleep. So you can still see in the brain the discrimination between one sound and another because they are applying the rule even during sleep. Now, if you tell them the rule, if it's X, press left, if it's Y, press right. And you do that during awake. Then I stop the sounds and you fall asleep. Then I start the sounds again during light sleep. Then it doesn't work.
It resets, so to speak.
Yeah. You need to push through the sleep onset that particular rule to keep it in your brain. So there's some sort of weird working memory health system if you push it from wakefulness into sleep through the sleep onset.
Really interesting. So I want to go to another paper, Tristan. So breath work induced psychedelic experiences modulate neural dynamics. So you say here breath work is an understudied school of practices involving intentional respiratory modulation to induce an altered state of consciousness. We simultaneously investigate the phenomenological and neural dynamics of breath work by combining temporal experience tracing, a quantitative methodology that preserves the temporal dynamics of subjective experience with low-density portable EEG devices. 14 novice participants completed a course of up to 28 breathwork sessions, yielding a phenomenological dataset of 301 breathwork sessions. So talk a little bit about it. Before we get the details of this, Tristan, so what exactly is breathwork again?
Breathwork is just a technique to consciously breathing. Instead of just like we're doing now, we're not thinking about how we're breathing. We're talking, we are chatting, we're thinking about the topic, etc. We're concentrated in our cognition and our ideas and how we express ourselves. If I ask you to pay attention to your breath and think how you're breathing, then you will take control, muscular, voluntary control of your rib cage. And then breathe in a conscious manner. So you're actually interfering with the automatic system of breathing, doing work on your breath work. Breath work is a series of techniques, that you can even trace them back really long. If you ever heard about pranayama in the classic yoga tradition, pranayama is a series of breathing techniques. And that's thousands of years old. Now, breathwork is, it's a conscious idea that through the breathing you can induce yourself, influence physical, emotional, and mental state. Right? That's the underlying idea.
And do they do this in yoga? I don't know much about yoga, but do they do this in yoga somewhere?
Well, in some aspect of yoga, you do it. Most of the yoga techniques involve you knowing how you're breathing, right? But also most of the sports, that you learn how to breathe during the sport. Your trainer, will tell you you're breathing weird and you're getting tired too fast. Or, if you need, some people will be quite good at doing it. Some people will need to learn to do it. If when the people start to learn how to run, they need to learn also how to breathe during the running. So yet again, some people use the breathing techniques to fall asleep, for example. And this is a really classic one. But the breathworks in itself, it's a techniques that in principle you can go into stress reduction, relaxation, improve focus, and all of those things. But also you can play with your breath to the point that you get high on your oxygen. Right? So this is you can get high of lowering your oxygen. You get like drunk of CO2, and then you get a shot of oxygen. And you get higher on your oxygen. So you induce these altered states of consciousness by playing around with your access to oxygen. So that's the underlying idea, that you can work through the breathing techniques towards moments of higher order, higher states of of consciousness that involve these sensations of bliss. And other things that, depending on the technique, depending on on the person, how long they've been doing it, how long they do it for the pattern, right?
So I had to look at the data, Tristan. So my Apple Watch, for instance, measures my breathing rate while I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
And I found very high variation in it. Sometimes I'm breathing a lot, sometimes I'm not. So could that be correlated with dreams, you think?
Can be related to what?
Could that be correlated with dreaming? The breathing rate that the technology is measuring.
I mean, It could be, not necessarily. I mean, there's not much, work on that sense. The dreams seem to be very related to the type of sleep you have that night, and also what happened during the day.
Yeah.
But less necessarily related to physiological, specific physiological aspect that you might happen during the day. Yeah.
So it should have some therapeutic effects, right? So you say here, exploratory analyses showed that the aperiodic exponent of the power spectral density, but not oscillatory alpha power, yielded similar neurophenomenological associations. So do we have some therapeutic possibilities here with breath work?
So the underlying idea of this type of strong breathing exercise and breath work techniques is that were used for improving mental health, thousands of years ago, as a ancient rituals therapeutic ancient rituals, right? Some cultures, some communities, hundreds of years ago, they were already using substances, sometimes altered state substances like psychedelic-like substances. Some others were using breathing techniques in that sense, right, to alter their emotional state, etc. So it's not surprising that the discussion about altered states and psychedelics and it's high now on mental health, and there's a big push to see if the psychedelics the specific type of psychedelics do help with different mental health problems like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, and anorexia nervosa, different versions of things. Now, they're very cheap, more involved, but very cheap and access to everyone, and not determined by companies' breathing techniques. Do have a lot of potentials, but for that you need a shift of paradigm, right? There was in the West, particularly in Europe and in North America, but also in South America and other in Asia, there was a big shift of mindfulness, like around 30 years ago, right? And it got installed in the system, in the health system of countries, of Western countries, with a big effect, but not strong effects per person, but very a small effect, but millions of people. So it's accepted, approved legally as a normal anxiety, lower anxiety technique, and etc. to control pain and other things. Now, it's just a very small part of what you could do by controlling how you breathe, what you think, and etc. Breathwork is a very strong way of doing it, potentially. That if the clinical trials start to show that it can be fairly useful for specific pathologies, then I'm assuming this is going to happen, and it will be some countries will start to do it. Maybe not in US, because in US the medical system is determined by money, but in other countries where a more socialist medical system, when a therapy is cheaper and effective, then that therapy is the preferred therapy.
Yeah, I mean, it is available to everybody. It's accessible.
Yeah.
And if there's some science underneath that, that'll be awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it's a long time, a long way to go. It's been almost 10 years now. The trials on psychedelics pharmacology ones started, and then there's only one drug approved, and there's another one probably going to come. So it takes time. My assumption, my bet would be that the breathing technique, psychedelic-like breathing techniques, will be faster once some of these pharmacology psychedelics are installed, then equivalent-like trips created by breathing techniques like the one we show in the paper might be approved faster, effectively because they don't involve a pharmacological danger or risk, right?
So I want to go to another paper, Tristan. So direct brain recordings reveal implicit encoding of structure in random auditory streams. You say here the brain excels at processing sensory input, even in rich and chaotic environments. And we talked about the auditory input as being sort of dominant in many ways. But you say mounting evidence attributes this to sophisticated internal models of the environment that draw on statistical structures in the unfolding sensory input. Understanding how and where such modeling proceeds is a core question in statistical learning and predictive processing. In this context, we address the role of transitional probabilities as an implicit structure supporting the encoding of the temporal structure of a random auditory stream. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's a lot in the news about LLMs. And you feed a machine a lot of data, and the machine can predict the next word. I don't think it's anything to do with artificial intelligence. I mean, that's a bias, but it is sort of in the same vein, isn't it? I mean, if I give a human a stream of auditory pattern, the brain is going to learn that pattern, and if there is some sort of a difference in the pattern, it's going to quickly pick up on it, right? Is that the way to think about it?
I mean, again, we have evolved to capture, of course, detect a difference, as we were talking earlier, detection, to discriminate among different sounds. What is our target, if we have our target, or even to detect and discriminate something that is useful or important for us, even if it wasn't something we expected. So there's a several aspect here, right? It's an aspect of expectation, it's an aspect of discrimination in itself. And there's an aspect of what the perceptual system can do with patterns. So it's not just one thing, but can also be a complex pattern that becomes meaningful to us. And if you play the game of in the middle of the library, say pop pop pop, and then people in their minds are going to do pop pop without even trying to say it or anything. And if you ask, so there's aspects that are ingrained in our brain as patterns. A lot of these are musical, but other things, too. So it's billions of neurons, right? Ready to process, complexity. So we are definitely very much tuned, through evolution to capture these patterns in a much more complicated ways that we initially think we are. And that's what happens with artificial grammar, right? So I can show you a fake language and you listen to it for a long time. You say, I don't understand anything, but you're picking up the grammar, the patterning of the syllables, even if you don't not understand it. So you might not get the semantics, the meaning, but you start to feel the patterns. And you might know about those patterns, that grammar of that invented language or new language, already more than you think that you know. And if I start to translate the syllables to you, then you will be able to form small sentences because you learned the grammar before, the patterning, before you learn the semantics, the meaning of these particular sounds or phonemes, or that sort of gives you a sense of what we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, Homo sapiens are good pattern finders. I mean, that's how we survived. But I want to ask you, so I get the sense that the auditory function, the auditory pattern finding, I get the sense that it is potentially more efficient or more effective than visual. Is that true or no?
I think it's more efficient in terms of time, but definitely not it's well, I mean, it integrates in time much better than the visual. So because in the visual we see a lot at the same time, so we see a map of the system. In auditory, the map is in time. We need to wait until the sounds unfold to see that. So auditory system is really tuned, into evolutionary, into the time information of the pattern, while the visuals is in the spatial. So we can capture really hidden visual patterns, even if they flash it to us in 100 milliseconds, which in auditory will be impossible because there was no pattern in 100 milliseconds. So I think it's very clear that the two systems are very complementary in that respect, right? The visual system can integrate in time, but it's not as good as the auditory. Of course, when they're combined, they're very powerful. So audiovisual integration is, something amazing.
So efficiency is part of it, right? So if I understand this correctly, Tristan, I don't think I do. The auditory channels gets less information than the visual channels. And if I need to make a very quick decision, I would probably bias toward auditory. I mean, I'm just trying to find a pattern in the inputs because I think that channel is much clearer and much less information. Is that the way to think about it, or no?
Yeah, I think it depends really on the situation. I think that if the situation is unfolding, and there is enough information in the auditory system, then the time information of the situation unfolding, you're going to trust more your auditory system. Now, if the auditory pattern it's less informative than the visual, then you're going to rely on the visual. So that's, we are really good integrating things. So we are going to bias our decision making depending on the richness of the information of the channel that we're getting it, right? And that there's plenty of experiments where they vary the amount of richness of information that you get from the audiovisual experiments, and then we see how we are answering this. What happens is something very interesting, that the auditory system integrates faster decision with less information. That I agree with you. So you will be faster to respond to auditory signals most likely, and you will take a decision with less information.
Yeah, potentially less critical decision. More critical information more critical decision with less information.
Yeah.
It's sort of the information ratio issue. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that.
So I just want to conclude on this paper and go on to another one. So our work provides a comprehensive picture of the neural correlates of automatic encoding, of implicit structure that can be the crucial substrate for the swift detection of patterns and unexpected events in the environment. AI is the big thing now, but in that context, training matters here, right? So if I have a pattern that I am hearing over and over again, I would imagine I'll get really good at detecting a difference in that pattern over time.
Yeah, again, this happens in every possible, sensory experience, right? You capture an auditory pattern, you capture a visual pattern, particular, sensory pattern, even smell. And we are many times we are one trial learners, right? So you hear it once and somehow was salient or important or meaningful, etc., or relevant, and then that stays there, encoded in some specific neuronal network. But it depends on many things that we are learning to understand, while many times in the artificial systems, we can tune these systems into remembering everything. So there's a very big difference in all of these artificial systems, is that unless we code them like a brain, and we don't know enough of the brain to code them like the brain, they don't work like a brain. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's truly artificial. It's not natural at all. And it doesn't work like a brain. It doesn't. And we know it doesn't. So people say,
Yeah.
oh, people, we're going to have general artificial intelligence, not like humans. There's
Yeah.
going to be another type of intelligence. Oh, the machine's going to be
Yeah.
conscious, not like humans. So let's keep on talking about, what we're doing with the AI, artificial intelligence. But let's be clear, they are not like humans. Whether they pass the Turing test or etc., it's a completely different discussion
Mhm.
about how they are intelligent and how they are conscious. And I think we need to stop simplifying that
Yes.
discussion. It's really, really, important not to make these blanket statements. Oh, they're going to surpass us in intelligence. In exactly what? They will do
Yes.
things for us. That'd be great.
Yeah.
With
Money
us,
flows into
that would be
hype.
great. Yeah, yeah.
The hype has to be perpetuated. If nature knew carbon and silicon are equivalent, it would have run that alternative experiment. It didn't.
And
And
that
there's a
doesn't
good
seem to be
reason
the
why. Yeah.
case. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to be the case, but we'll
So
find
I want to
out.
finish up with another paper, Tristan. So this is very interesting. So towards an empathetic and metacognitive digital therapy framework, you say we present an early design of mindful AI, a digital therapy framework that perceives multimodal effect, plans cognitive behavioral therapy strategy, and self-monitors its own language. The proposed model architecture consists of a state vector incorporating sentiment, EEG band power, heart rate variability, and galvanic skin response, a reinforcement learning planner that learns to probe, reflect, or reframe a large language model. Um, I've never been a big fan of LLMs, Tristan, but this is one application that I believe it could actually add some value to. I don't think any of the Silicon Valley tech guys are worried about this, at least till now. Um, but this is because humans are very impressionable, let me call it that way. And therapy, both physical and behavioral therapy, are significantly driven by placebo effect, not necessarily just chemicals. And so, yeah, I mean, if you can create something that guides a human to a better state, that would be very useful. I think this is potentially the best application I have thought of, I have seen in artificial intelligence, quote unquote.
Yeah. So my worry is that has been a simplification of emotional understanding of emotions, simple emotions and complex emotions by measuring skin conductance or heart rate variability. But like if we knew, we don't really know the actual detailed relationship between those physiological variables that we say are related to emotions and the
Yeah.
actual complex emotions. So if you say I'm a particularly anxious, because I had a road rage this morning, and I have this, an easy sensation after the road rage, that I have a weird impression that it was also my fault. I don't think it was my fault, but it feels like it was my fault, and I end up, I couldn't keep my cool, and I'm really anxious now, etc., etc. And the following day it continues, but it evolves in a different way. We don't know what's happening with the physiological system in you
Mm.
that matches that particular road rage, guilt, weird things, etc. Does it matter? It probably matters. Is the
Yeah.
AI really good at this? Well, not if it doesn't have the information about your description of your emotional state. The
Mm.
the so it needs so it's true, I agree with you, to have some physiological data to match and understand how that can be predictive of emotional states, and resolution of emotional states is very useful. But
Mm.
the main idea is that it needs to be trained with the same person, like severely for months and months, so you can really capture the person in different moments, different states, different situations, etc. And then
Mm.
maybe it will start to be really useful. Now, blank statements about how skin conductance can be useful for the um, the bot that gives you the therapy bot, that it's unlikely to be very useful. That's my take, because it's a very rough indication of a thing.
I quite like this, Tristan. So one could imagine wearable technologies that measures a bunch of things. I mean, there's obviously privacy concerns and regulatory aspects need to look into it, but one could envision wearable technologies that that collects a lot of data and feeds into some sort of AI, just call it AI. I think it's intelligent automation, IA, not AI, but in any case, it could feed into an intelligent automation agent, and it could make good decisions, have some feedback, and keep that person operating in a more efficient state. I think we are not necessarily too far from it. What do you think?
I mean, I guess it depends on what's the aim, right? I mean, we don't have we don't have a lot of feedback, conscious feedback about how we feel, unless you're really good at doing interoception. Again, we go back to the people who are really good meditators, and they can assess their internal state, because they've been training themselves in assessing their internal state, right? So that's a good model to understand things, how people feel, and this is what you learn to do when you have a mental health problem, and in therapy, what you learn is to really stop and see how you feel, and apply some possible techniques that allows you to put you back into a state that you're less anxious or less depressed, or more in line with the context that you're dealing with. Whether by having a partner, AI or IA, whatever is the case, to discuss about these things, or that they tell you, by the way, your heart rate just now was crazy. I don't know if you notice. I think it's useful, potentially.
It's very
we don't
useful,
know exactly how. We don't know exactly how it's useful and in which situation would be. But for us to get more feedback about how the situation goes is potentially useful, as long as it's not dumbed down feedback, right? When people start to trust more in what the AI and their watch tells them about how they feel, then things get a bit.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Excellent, Tristan. Yeah, thanks for sticking with me. Last time we had some technical difficulties, but I think we got this time.
Yeah. Today is a day where the internet in Cambridge seems to be working.
Yeah, I think they connected a few wires together on the internet. So we're good. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, thanks again for spending time with me.
Yeah. So just like a aspect of the introduction. I'm now in the University of Cambridge, and the MRC.
Oh, okay.
And I'm a professor of consciousness and cognition in the university.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I'm not in the MRC anymore.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay.
No, it's okay. Just if you're gonna do the intro, I didn't want to cut the flow, right? But
so where in the US are you?
I'm in UK. I mean, in
okay.
Cambridge.
But you are coming to the US, you're saying?
No. It's not a country for scientists now.
Oh, come on.
No, it's not. It's not.
I mean, we do all the research here. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, every time these last few months when we put a post, there's like 60% applicants from US. They want to run away from US because there's the situation is not favorable. At least one in cognitive sciences is not. I'm really surprised. I mean, we used to have a few candidates from US. Maybe they're thinking in coming to Europe and etc. etc. Now it's wild, and and it's crazy. I mean, it's people think like, why are you applying for this post? And the person says, well, I don't want to be here. I just want to go somewhere else. Like, hey, that's concerning.
Yeah. So as an American, I can only weep in silence.
Yeah.
And that's all I can do. Excellent. Yeah. Thanks for spending time with me.
Yep. You tell me how this goes. Good luck with editing.
Thank you.
Ciao, thanks.